This message was like a glorious struggle for me. Some messages, they just come, and other ones, it's like slugging it out. And this was one of those messages because I knew God wanted to teach on this topic and this scripture, but it took me a while to find out where He wanted to go, but I believe that there is a message for us. So here we go, Mark chapter 4 and verse 35. And it's a familiar passage, a familiar story. And it says this: "That day when evening came, He, Jesus, said to His disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took Him along, just as He was in the boat. There were also other boats with Him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke Him and said to Him, 'Teacher, do you not care? We are drowning!' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Shh! Quiet.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to His disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?'"
Wow.
The subject we're going to talk from is the roar that calms the storm. Lord Jesus, we ask that You would speak, and God, that Your voice would be heard, Your roar would be heard. That You'd speak through our circumstances, and You'd open up our eyes to something new. God, You teach us from Your word in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. I recently started working out.
Yay.
About time.
I'm on day. Well, I watch myself every week just to get better at preaching, and I've been noticing, like, man, I'm kind of gaining a little bit of weight. I need to start working out. So I'm on day 2. Nice. I feel like I'm in it. I'm in it, you know what I'm saying?
You're committed.
I'm committed. Anyway, so I'm doing these workout videos. I don't know if you ever do the videos. Come on, don't look at me like I'm a weirdo. You do the videos. So they're called Insanity for a reason. They're insane. But I did them. I'm doing them because I did them previously. This was like 5 years ago. I was really into the Insanity videos, and I got to a place. You'll know what I'm talking about if you've ever done like the videos, because you start out really slow. I mean, I got to a place where I could do like the full set of Insanity videos, which is pretty impressive, and that was like 5 years ago, and I was like really going for it. So anyways, I took out the videos. I'm like, I've done this a lot, and I did it for like 2 years straight, consistently, and so I really got into it. So I put them in, a little naive, you know what I'm saying? Because I just remember really dominating these videos before. So I'm like, how out of shape could I really be? So I threw the video in, and it has a 8-minute warm-up, and then like a 7-minute stretch. And that sounds like a long time, but I mean, it's a really intense stretch. Like you're sweating during the stretch. So it's like an 8-minute warm-up, 7-minute stretch, and then it starts the 25-minute insane workout. So I'm on day 2 of the warm-up and the stretch. I like couldn't get past the stretch. I'm like exhausted. My legs are burning. Okay, so I am a total mess right now, but I'm on the road. But I learned something in the middle of it. Is it's just like I was aware after I sort of hit the wall that I'm not really living up to my capacity right now. Like I know there's more in me. I know it. And I've just sort of been going along and not realizing, you know, even when I'm like with my kids, I don't know if you can relate, where like I just don't have the energy I used to play with them. Ed knows what I'm talking about. Because we play golf together. And anyways, so the point is, doing these videos, I'm like, man, I really need to get back into it because there's more in me. I know there's more in me, and I just really haven't like been living up to my potential. And I believe that there's a message for us in here about our storms, because I believe that God is calling us up to something that He was calling His disciples to, and I believe He uses the storm to do it. But there's a catch, and it requires us to see correctly and walk through it correctly. And so I'm going to start off by saying that I think a good definition of a storm or a trial is something that is too strong for you. I mean, all of us go through hard things and we have bad days, but when we hit a trial or a storm, it's something that is, I love this picture because it's a great depiction of actual boat. I've seen one of those actual boats in Israel. They're small, there is no like underbelly, it's just is what it is, and so you can see how easy the waves can crash in on us. James chapter 1 verse 2 says this, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face," everyone say face.
Face.
Whenever you face trials of many kinds. We're going to talk a lot about facing our storms, facing our trials. But I want you to remember that word trial because we're going to come back to it. Can you imagine the disciples, like, how long did they bail water before they woke Jesus up? Like, they're out on this sea, and you have to realize that Jesus is their rabbi. He's like their big deal. But at this point, Jesus has never been out on a boat with them. He's taught from the boat. Later on, he walks on the water, but he's never actually been in the boat out on open sea that we know of that's recorded with the disciples. They're still kind of fairly new in this relationship, and they go out on the sea, and these guys are fishermen, or at least most of them are, and so they know what they're doing. This is their territory now, and all of a sudden, this storm comes up. How long did the disciples bail water and freak out before they're like, we actually need to wake Jesus up? I mean, can you imagine this conversation where the disciples were like, just keep bailing, like they're going for it. And Jesus is literally sleeping. He's asleep. And they're looking over like, no, you wake him up. No, you wake him up. Like, I'm not waking him up. I'm just going to keep bailing. And at some point, it came to the place where they're like, it's too strong. This storm is too strong for us. You gotta wake them up. You know you're no match for the storm, and I just wrote a few examples. When you feel like you're punching the waves. You ever feel like you're punching the waves? Like there's something there that I'm trying to fight, trying to get through, but like my hand just goes right through it. Like I can't get a handle on it. You ever felt like that? I cannot get a handle on this thing. And I don't know why. There's something, it's a storm. You ever try, you're no match for the storm when you're trying to control others. When somebody else is the eye of your storm, is the whole point of your storm, and you're like, if I could just get them to do what I need them to do, then I would no longer have a storm. You're in a storm you can't control. Okay?
Hallelujah.
You're in no match for the storm when you're carrying someone else's burden. Now we're called to come alongside people. But when we're carrying their burden, it's a storm. It's too strong for you. When you feel you need to defend yourself, oh, dang it, never been there. You feel like somebody else is misrepresenting you or the situation, and you're just like, what? And you just want to, blast away on Facebook. You're in a storm that you can't control. Trust me, as soon as you start defending it, it's going to get worse. Waves are coming. You're in a storm you can't control when you've done all that you can do. You can't do anymore. It's a storm. So, let's be honest. There's a lot of talk, and there's even some songs about battles. Like the battles of the Lords, and battling the enemy. And I think that's a relevant topic. It's a relevant idea that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, that there is an enemy. He's out to get you, steal, kill, and destroy. And that the enemy is active in our lives. And we have to recognize him, and we have weapons to cast down those arguments and those strongholds and defeat him. He is a defeated foe. And listen, that's a powerful message. That's not this message. I want to talk to you about the storm that Jesus leads us into. Now, before we get there, everybody's was like, wait, what happened? Jesus leads us into the storm. Okay, I want to bring up this next slide because there are 3 F's that I think are important to just remember. These are indications of the enemy. And I worded them like this because I thought it would be easier to remember if it was all F's. F's are bad. If it's fuzzy, if it makes you fuzzy, fearful, or fatal, it's not God. When I say fuzzy, I mean confusing. God is not a God of confusion. Have you ever like just woken up or been through a season, it's just like fuzzy. It's just like I can't see straight. I can't understand what's going on. Like there's something about this situation that is confusing. And that is a staple of the enemy. And when you come up against that, that's when you pause. And God's not asking you to weather a storm. That's when you go against the enemy and you retake clarity, because God is a God of clarity. Not confusion, not disorder. And so it's really important, anytime in your family, in your finances, in your relationships, if it's just like, this just feels weird, take authority over that. Second thing is fearful. Anytime there's fear, there's a spirit of fear. Like that's not God. That's not a storm He's leading you into. And so you stop and you declare that God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And so you go through that and you claim those promises. And the last one is fatal. And when I mean fatal, I mean like a spirit of oppression. A spirit of like, this is going to be fatal. A suicidal spirit, like anything that has that taste to it, the enemy's tentacles are on it. And that's when you pause and you go, no. That's not something that we're going to stand for in our home, in my life, in my relationships. And so you take authority of that. So that sounds good?
Yeah.
So when we talk about storms that God's leading us into, this is excluded. These things are excluded from that kind of dynamic because those are not God. God doesn't tempt us. He tests us. Turn to your neighbor and say, it's a test. God tests us for a specific reason, and these are not tests. They're demonic. Okay, moving on. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about storms that Jesus is leading into, and I want to read James. We started out by James saying, when you're in trials, count it all joy. A storm, a trial that God is allowing. And he said count it all joy for this reason. The next verse is verse 3. And it says this, for you know that when your faith is tested, it stirs up power within you to endure all things.
Amen.
You're powerful. You're more powerful than you think. God sees something in you of power, of courage, that you don't see in yourself. My pastor always used to tell me, I'm greater in the eyes of the Lord than I am in myself, than I am in my own. I'm greater in His eyes than I am in my eyes. There's power in you. And this is the reason for trials. God leads us into them because the stirring of our faith stirs up power. So that word trial that James uses, count it all joy when you face trials, when you face them. That word trial is a Greek word, pyrosmos. And it's the same word that Jesus used in the parable that He told right before they went out on the ocean. So right before they go out and face this trial, Jesus tells a parable, and you're familiar parable, and it's a parable of the seed thrown out to the sower. And there's 4 kinds of soils that the seed falls on, and one of them is seen in Luke 8 chapter 13. Those on the rocky ground are ones who receive the word with joy when they hear it, but when they have no root, they believe for a while, but in the time of testing, they fall away. I always used to read this and go like, those are shallow Christians. Those are uncommitted Christians. Those are unfaithful Christians. Have you ever met a Christian that's just kind of like, they come for a little while, they're all excited for a moment, and then they fall away? Have you ever been that Christian? Okay, all of us. And I always just thought like, wow, they just like, they have no commitment. Where's their commitment? And that's really important for us in this talk about trials, in this talk about storms. Where's your commitment? This is what we tell ourselves. But James says trials test our faith, not our faithfulness. Trials, storms, they test our faith. See, James says that the testing of our faith stirs up power within us. Not your faithfulness. Not your commitment. Let me ask you a question. Do you want to be committed or powerful? I mean both. Is it a trick question? Committed. Wait, no, powerful. What I noticed over 2 days, my vast experience of working out over 2 days, is that they talked a lot about using your core muscles.
Amen.
And there's a ton of exercises that we do in these videos, and the guy says over and over, lift with your core. Strengthen your core. Don't lift with your back. And he says it over and over because it's easy to lift with your back.
Yes.
It's just easier. I mean, we're doing like these high knees and all these lunges and everything, and the whole time he's like, lift with your core, lift with your core. And the whole time I'm thinking, my core is really weak. I mean, really weak. I don't have a core right now. I can't barely make it past the stretching. Lift with your core. So we kept saying over and over and over again. Because it's so much easier to just make it through the exercise, compensating, lifting with other muscles, and never using my core. The disciples were trying to make it through the storm with hard work and faithfulness. Like, we are going to kill ourselves by just bailing water over and over and over again, and we're going to give ourselves to this, and God darn it, we are not going to wake up the Messiah because we can do this. I mean, we're just going to give ourselves to it, and we can get through it. This is just a storm. This too will pass. And so if we just stay faithful, and if we just put our head down, then this too will pass. Anybody ever heard that? This too will pass. And it's like, that's true. But there's a major problem with this. Because you can lift with your back, and you can get through the workout without ever isolating your core, and you don't get stronger. The workout video just ended. That's pretty much all that happened. And your heart rate was up, but your core was never isolated. The world is full of too many faithful, powerless Christians.
Wow.
I mean, I'm throwing some punches today.
It's good.
I'm telling you what, I wrestled through this message, I'm telling you. The world is full of faithful Christians. And when I say faithful, I mean like, go to church on Sunday, and like read the verse of the day on the little app thing, and just kind of like, and there's nothing wrong, like all that stuff's good stuff. It's good stuff. But there is power in you
Amen.
that God is trying to develop. But it's easy to go about your life and develop a little bit of a keg instead of a six-pack. Your core gets kind of rounded, and you just learn to live life without having a strong core. Anybody with me?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing just fine without a strong core, except for when my son wants to wrestle. Or I want to be able to play football for longer than 5 minutes. Or I want to be able to make it past the first 5 minutes of the exercise, right? And then I realize, wait, I don't have a strong core. I've been compensating in other ways. I've been making it through because I've been faithful. But I don't know that I've allowed God to stir me to develop my power. See, I believe that Jesus saw what was ahead for those disciples. I know he did. Because he'd been talking to them. Hey guys, I won't always be here. I mean, can you imagine like the guy that you're with all the time, and that you're the guy that you so look up to, and then you learn that he's your Messiah, and he starts saying like, hey, I'm not going to be here very much longer. What are you talking about? But Jesus knew I'm not always going to be here. And not only that, a storm is coming that's so much greater than this little earthly storm. Like, we're out in the waves and like, okay, but you have to understand that you guys are going to face some things as I send you loose on the world to transform it. Do you know that Christianity, that even the world says that the downfall to the Roman Empire is due to Christianity? The values that seeped into the Roman Empire literally transformed it from the inside out. Jesus knew that he was going to set these disciples loose, and what they were going to face was so much greater. They needed a strong core. They needed faith to stir in them to say, you know what? I'm greater. I'm greater than what I can see. And I need somebody to call me out onto the storm and say, you know what? This waves, it's temporal, it's earthly. There's something beyond it. See beyond it. You need to learn to face it.
That's right.
When your faith is tested, it stirs up power within you. Ephesians chapter 3, Paul speaks about this in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 16. It says, I pray that out of his glorious riches, he, God, may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, in your inner core, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith.
Yes, amen.
Verse 21, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all that we ask or think. Stop. It's not because we're just like wishing upon a star. He is able to do immeasurably more than we ask or imagine according to his power that's work in us. That power that's at work in us.
Holy Ghost.
We don't just stand around and say, God, I hope you do something. God, I hope you do something about these wind and these waves because it's really killing me. There's power in us that he is evoking, and we can only find it when we're in those stupid videos, realizing I need to build my core. I got to build it. It's in the middle of the storm. So Jesus is teaching us how to face the storm. How to face the storm, not work through it. Listen, if you're in a storm, it's not demonic, it's just a storm. Don't just grin and bear it. Because more than likely, God has you there. He's not afraid of the storm. He can call it out in 1 second. There's a reason he hasn't. Because he's building your core.
Amen.
Because he knows the power in you.
Preach
And he knows what you need to accomplish what he has for you and me.
Amen.
Don't fight the storm, rebuke the storm, faithfully bail out water in the storm, face it. And by facing it, I mean, he's calling you to ask, he's calling out the question like, what do you believe? In the middle of this storm, what do you believe? That's a question that we don't ask when we're just trying to like, this too will pass. This too will pass, like the only thing we believe. It's going to pass and I can make it through. Okay, that's not helping. What do you believe by faith in the middle of your storm? What are the promises that you can hold on to and claim in the middle of this storm that you can build your faith on? Face it. So Jesus gets up from his Messiah nap. I love this. Anybody take Messiah naps? Jesus loved his power naps. He gets up and he calms the storm. And then he turns to his disciples and he goes, dude, you guys got no faith. And listen, I've heard some bad theology preached on this message. And I'm not saying my theology is always perfect. But listen, Jesus was not saying to the disciples, if you just would have had more faith, then this storm wouldn't be here. He's not saying to the disciples, if you just had more faith and you could get up like me and you could speak to the wind and the waves and they would just go away. He's not saying that to them. And I think that sometimes in the charismatic word of faith thing, we can buy onto this theology that you're only in this storm because you don't have enough faith. And that's just so damaging and wrong. Jesus promises, listen, you will face trouble in this life. And there's for a lot of different reasons. We live in a fallen world. You're surrounded by imperfect people that love to inflict storms on you. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough, Jesus himself will call you out and invite you into a glorious storm. So, we should be the least judgmental people when somebody's going through something. Like, we think we know, like, your bad choices and this and that. And it's just like, stop it. We all need to stop it with the judgmental. I'm not saying you guys are not judgmental, but in general, just you guys understand what I'm saying. Like, we as people can just, easy to jump to conclusions when we see somebody going through something. And it's just like, no! These guys were soaking wet with Jesus in their boat. Like, Jesus can be so near you and so close to you and right in the center of God's will, and you are soaking wet. It's okay. It's okay to be soaking wet. Jesus is there, even in the pain. He's there. This is not a gospel that, like, man, believe in Jesus and everything's going to be great. No, it's not. It won't always be great. But Jesus is there. And he's calling us up to something greater. The storm won't always be there. It won't. But he's there in the middle of it. And he's forming and fashioning something beautiful. Jesus wanted them to learn to stand firm, full of faith, unaffected by the physical storm that has no power over the kingdom realm, of which you are a son and daughter. These waves, this wind, like, this is not your real home. They don't have any real power. Process this. The storm that was so scary, so earth-shattering, and life-threatening, Jesus ended with one word. He got up and he said, "Meh, away with you." But the storm raging in them, the storm that they would continue to face on land and sea, well after Jesus was gone, Jesus has no power to calm. He can just lead the way. That fear and those inner giants that rage in us, Jesus just leads the way and says, you're powerful beyond those things. And I can show you the way. I'm modeling something by sleeping in the middle of this thing. So face it. The wind and the waves, it's not the thing. There's a deeper thing. So let me lead you the way. Lastly, and we'll land the plane here, Jesus is teaching us first how to face it. Don't just power through it. Face it. What do I believe? Ask God. What are you doing here? What are you fashioning in me? And lastly, Jesus is teaching us how to see through the storm.
Thank you, Jesus.
When you're in survival mode, we start operating in the natural realm. What we can see with our eyes. When someone shoots you with a squirt gun in the face, what's the first thing that goes? Your eyes, right? It's like you get water in the eyes, in the face. It's like this is the first thing you're doing. Like, I can't see. And when you face a storm, when you're in the middle of waves crashing, the first thing that goes is your eyesight. Your ability to see. And the Bible says that the just shall live by faith and not by sight. When we're in a storm, it's easy to just live by what we can see. What's there, what's natural. And then we make decisions and then we react based on that. And God was helping them because when he got up, what did he rebuke? I want to read it. It says, he got up and he rebuked the wind. Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. Jesus rebuked the wind. The disciples, they weren't focused on the wind. All they could see was the waves. All they could see was the water. It's crashing in. Like they're literally bailing. We are soaking wet. The wind, the waves are the issue. And Jesus got up and said, no. It's not even the waves. That's not even the problem. Like you're swinging at something that's just a symptom. It's just a symptom.
Wow.
There's something behind it.
That's good.
It's the wind. And so when you face it, then you can see differently. And this is where God gives you strategies on how to move
All right.
forward. Paul prayed that you would open up the eyes of their heart that they could see the righteous live by faith. I'm going to end with this. I love the story of Elijah, 2 Kings. It says, when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. And says, "Oh my Lord, what shall we do? I'm freaking out." And Elijah says, "Open up his eyes, Lord, so he might see." And then the Lord opened the servant's eyes. He looked and saw the hills full of horses, chariots, and fire all around Elijah. How would his strategy, how would his perspective, how would your perspective and your strategy change that moment if you got up and you saw the army and then you saw a giant, flaming chariots and horses all around? Our life would be different. But it takes building your core and realizing, God, you are calling me up to be somebody powerful, to begin to see differently. I want to close by simply saying this. When your faith is tested, it stirs up power within you. When your faith is tested, it stirs up power within you. Will you close your eyes and bow your heads for a moment?
Amen.
Jesus.